as one of the richest people on the planet. Anil didn't just inherit these companies, he became India's second largest telecom operator. And banks were becoming risk averse. Everything collapses. This isn't just a story about failure. How quickly things can change in business. The recent trending news comes in. Imagine waking up one day as one of the richest people on the planet with a net worth soaring to 42 billion US dollars, only to find yourself declaring bankruptcy in just few years later. This is the astonishing journey of Anil Ambani, the man who went from heights of success to the depths of despair, all while navigating the tenacious waters of business, family rivalry, and market disruptions. What went wrong? How did a telecom giant crumble under the weights of his own ambition? Join me as we unravel the dramatic rise and the fall of Anil Ambani, revealing the crucial lessons that every entrepreneurs and business professionals should learn to avoid similar fate. Buckle up. This is the story of Trump, tragedy, and the unpredictable nature of wealth. Hey tech and business enthusiasts, welcome back to my channel. I am Bharat Natarajan, a tech PM in one of the world's biggest tech companies. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most dramatic business stories of our time, the incredible rise and the spectacular fall of Anil Ambani. Last week, if you have seen the business news, Anil Ambani's name was trending again, especially with Yes Bank's case trending again. But here is the thing, this isn't just another business story. This is a masterclass. How billionaires can lose everything and, more importantly, what we can learn from it. In just 17 years, Anil Ambani went from 25 billion US dollars to declaring bankruptcy. This isn't just losing money, that's obliterating wealth at a scale that's almost incomprehensible. So, grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let's break down this incredible case study. Trust me, whether you're running a startup or running a Fortune 500 company, there are lessons here that could save your life. Let's start from the very beginning. To understand Anil's fall, you must know his rise. And honestly, it was meteoric. In 2005, something unprecedented happened in Indian business. The Ambani empire, built by the legendary Dhirubhai Ambani, was split between his two sons. This wasn't just a family business dispute. This was dividing India's one of the largest conglomerates. And Anil got what seemed like a better deal at that time. He inherited Reliance Groups, which included Reliance Communication, Reliance Infrastructure, Reliance Capital, and Reliance Power. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Anil didn't just inherit these companies, he actually had a vision. And for few years, that vision was unstoppable. Here are some of the success factors that Anil had. Here is the factor number 1, which is strategic vision in emerging markets. Anil saw something that many had missed. India was about to explode digitally. This was 2005. Remember, the iPhones didn't exist and Facebook was barely a small baby. But Anil bet big on telecommunication. Orcom became India's second largest telecom operator. They were aggressive, they were innovative, they were capturing market share like anything. The company's revenue grew from 2 billion US dollar in 2006 to 5 billion US dollars in 2010. Let's move on to success factor 2, capital market mastery. Here is something that impressed me when researching this. Anil was a master in raising capital. Reliance Power's IPO in 2008 was the largest at that time, raising 3 billion US dollars. The subscription was overbooked by 73 times. Think about that. Investors were literally throwing money at him. Let's move on to success factor 3, which is political and regulatory navigation. Anil understood something crucial. In emerging markets like India, you really don't need a business strategy, but you need to navigate complex regulatory environments. He built relationships across political spectrums and positioned his company to benefit out of it. In 2007, Anil was worth 42,000 billion US dollars, making him the 6th richest person in the world. But here is where the story takes a dark turn, and honestly, Here is where the real lessons begin. Let's see some of the early warnings Anil had before his empire collapsed. Firstly, it was the over leverage. Anil's companies were taking on massive debts to fuel the growth. Now, debt isn't inherently bad. Some of the most successful companies use leverage strategically, but there are differences between strategic debts and dangerous debts. In 2010, Reliance Group's combined debt was 12 billion US dollars. That's not unusual for large infrastructure companies. But here is the trick. Most of the debts were short term and had variable interest rates. Now, let's move on to the warning sign 2. Diversification without focus. This is something that I see in many startups today. It's a killer. Anil's group was in everything: telecom, power, finance, infrastructure, and even in Indian defense contracts. Now, diversification can be smart, but only if you can execute well across all verticals. The problem was that each of these sectors requires completely different skill sets, regulatory knowledge, and market understanding. Here is the warning sign 3. The 2G spectrum controversy. In 2010, the 2G spectrum scandal broke in India. While Anil wasn't directly implicated, Orcom was allocated with spectrum allocations that were questioned later. This created regulatory uncertainty and damaged the company reputation. Let's move on to warning sign number 4, which is cash flow versus asset value mismatch. This is technical but super important. Anil's companies had massive asset values on paper: telecom towers, power plants, and infrastructure projects. But these assets weren't generating proportional cash flow. Think of it like this. Imagine you own $1 million house, but you can only rent it for $1,000 a month. On paper, you're really worthy, but in reality, you can't service a large mortgage. Let's move on to the next section of this video, which is the perfect storm and the beginning of the systematic failure. Between 2010 and 2015, multiple factors converged to what I call a perfect storm for Anil Ambani's business. Firstly, the Jio launch. In 2016, his brother launched something called Jio with free voice calls and dirt cheap data. This was business warfare. Orcom's subscriber base collapsed. But here is what's fascinating. Mukesh's strategy was exactly what Anil had done in early 2000s. Aggressive pricing to capture market share. The student had become the master. Now let's move on to the factor number 2, which is the infrastructure trap. Anil had bet heavily on power generation, expecting massive demand growth in India. The logic was sound. India's growing economy would definitely need more electricity, but execution is everything. Many of the Reliance Power's projects faced land acquisition delays, environment clearance issues, coal linkage problems, state electricity board payment problems. Now, let's move on to factor number 3, the debt refinancing crisis. Remember the mountain of debt I mentioned? By 2017, this was becoming impossible to refinance, and here is why. The credit rating was downgraded, the asset values had declined, cash flows were negative, and banks were becoming risk averse. It's like a house of cards. Once one element fails, everything collapses. Now, let's move on to factor number 4, the yes banks connection. Now, this is where the recent trending news comes in. Anil's companies had significant exposure to S-Bank through various loans and financial instruments. When S-Bank itself got into trouble in 2020, this created additional pressure for Reliance. Allegations suggest some of the financial arrangements have not properly followed the procedures, leading to legal cases we are seeing today. Now, let's move on to the final part of the video, which is the final collapse. In 2019, the situation was terminal. Orcom filed for bankruptcy. Reliance Infrastructure was selling assets to survive. In a British court in 2020, Anil declared his net worth as zero. Think about the psychological impacts of going from 42,000 billion US dollars to zero in your lifetime. And then the asset fire sale had begun. Everything had to go. All telecom towers had been sold to Jio. The power projects had been abandoned and sold for massive losses. Even his personal assets like Mumbai mansion had been put up for sale. Let's not forget, this wasn't about one man losing money. Thousands of employees lost jobs. Suppliers weren't paid. Shareholders had lost their investments. Small investors who had believed in Reliance brand wiped out. Alright, so what can we learn from this incredible story? Whether you are running a tech startup or a traditional business, these lessons are a gold mine. Firstly, the debt is a double-edged sword. Leverage can accelerate growth, but it can also accelerate failure. Here are the key principles. Match debt maturity with asset lives. Maintain debt to equity ratio that helps during economic downturns. Diversify your funding source. Always have a plan B for refinancing. Let's move on to lesson number 2, which is diversification. Anil's mistake was being in too many businesses without being excellent in a single one. For entrepreneurs, master one market before expanding. Ensure you have management bandwidth for each of the verticals. Do I understand the cash conversion cycle in my business? Understand that synergies between businesses are harder to achieve than they look. Now, let's move on to the lesson 3. Asset values are important, but only the cash flow can pay the bills. Always ask, can my asset generate a sustainable cash flow? Number 2, am I building a business or just accumulating assets? Do I understand the cash conversion cycle in my business? Let's move on to the lesson number 4. Disruption can come from anywhere. Anil probably would have never imagined his own brother could become the biggest rivalry. In today's world, always monitor the industry for potential disruptors. Invest in innovation even during tough times. Build businesses that can adapt to fundamental market changes. Let's move on to the final lesson, which is regulatory and political risk management. This is huge, especially for business in regulatory environment. Don't build your strategy around specific political relationships. Always ensure compliance systems are robust. Diversify regulatory risks across different jurisdictions. Here, before closing the video, here is the bonus tip. Anil's initial success came from great timing. Riding India's telecom boom. His downfall came in a bad timing. High debt just as interest rates rose and market had turned. So, there you have it. The incredible story of Anil Ambani to whooping 42,000 billion US dollars to zero in less than 2 decades. But here is what I want you to remember. This isn't just a story about failure. This is a story about how quickly things can change in business and why preparation, conservative financial management, and operation excel more than a vision alone. If you like this video, like it and comment what inspiring story do you want me to bring in this channel next. And please do share this video to your friends who are interested and passionate about business. Signing off now, Bharat Natarajan. Take care. Bye bye.